After the dinner with my parents, Selena and I grew closer. It wasn't anything dramatic, just small moments. Her laughter drifting across the room. The way she fussed over her meals, as if the baby could hear her complaints. The soft, almost unconscious way she cradled the gentle curve of her stomach. Those little things lingered in my mind longer than I expected. And inevitably, my thoughts wandered to her past, her ex-husband, Francis, and the betrayal she had endured. One afternoon, curiosity, or perhaps something deeper that I didn't want to name, pushed me to act. I called Aaron into my office. "Aaron," I said, keeping my voice calm and neutral, "why did the clinic choose a divorced surrogate? Was there no one else qualified?"
Actually, sir, she is very qualified. She has every quality you asked for. Intelligence, patience, resilience. Honestly, the list goes on. If there's any drawback at all, it's simply her status as divorced. But aside from that,
"She exceeds expectations." I frowned slightly. "I see." Aaron studied my expression for a moment before asking carefully, "Do you prefer someone else, sir?" He seemed to hesitate, as though he sensed something I wasn't saying. "No,
oh, I see. My apologies.
that's not what I meant." But his words stayed with me. "She seems different lately." The thought slipped into my mind before I could stop it. She seems lighter, happier, more alive. And for some reason, every time I noticed it, something tightened in my chest. A strange, unfamiliar tug. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the feeling. I am a man of reason. A man of contracts. This is business. The contract will end sooner than you think, I reminded myself firmly. Everything will return to normal. You'll have your heir, minus the mother. Selena is just a contract. The thought struck harder than it should have. You will never see her again after the contract ends. For a moment, my mind went completely blank. What happened to me? Why does the thought of that hurt?
Is there anything else you want to ask me?
No, that will be all. But even after Aaron left and I returned to my work, the ache in my chest refused to disappear. Something inside me had shifted, and I wasn't ready to admit it, not even to myself. I invited Selena to dinner tonight. This was it. The moment I had been putting off and quietly hoping for. I was going to tell her everything. No more distance. No more pretending this was just an arrangement. I'd already made up my mind. Whatever this was between us, I didn't want it to end as a contract. I wanted more. I wanted her. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be the one I would spend the rest of my life with. Foolish. The word tasted bitter now, because the moment I stepped into the restaurant, everything I thought I knew shattered. There she was, Selena, and she wasn't alone. Across the room, standing far too close to her, was a man I recognized instantly, her ex-husband. The way he leaned toward her, the way she didn't pull away. It was enough. Enough to crush every fragile hope I had built. Something cold settled in my chest. So this was the truth. She was never really mine. Maybe she never intended to be. Maybe to her, this had always been exactly what it was meant to be. A contract, an arrangement, a means to an end, a child. The realization hit harder than I expected. Was that all she wanted? To prove something? To prove she could carry a child, no matter who it was with? And I was the fool who thought it could become something more. A humorless breath escaped me. How pathetic. I straightened, forcing every emotion back behind the walls I had built so carefully over the years. This ends now. No more blurred lines. No more wishful thinking. If this was a contract, then I would treat it like one. Nothing more, nothing less. Tonight, I would remind myself exactly where I stand. And this time, I wouldn't forget.
Chapter 6, The Distance Between Us. That night, I barely slept. Lawrence's words echoed in my mind over and over again. Temporary, contract, compensate. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them again. By morning, my chest felt hollow. The warm feelings I had allowed myself to believe in yesterday were gone, replaced by something colder. Reality. This was never meant to be anything more than an agreement. I placed a hand over my stomach unconsciously. I couldn't feel the baby yet, but its existence was a constant reminder of the truth I couldn't outrun. This child was the reason I was here, nothing else. When I came downstairs for breakfast, Lawrence was already sitting at the dining table. He looked up the moment he heard my footsteps. For a brief second, our eyes met. Then I looked away. "Good morning," he said. His voice sounded normal, too normal. "Good morning," I replied quietly. I sat on the side of the table, keeping my gaze on the plate in front of me. Usually he would remind me to eat more, or ask if I had slept well. Today he said nothing. The silence between us felt awkward, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally he spoke. "You didn't sleep well?" It wasn't a question. I forced a small smile. "Just a little tired." Lawrence studied me for a moment, as if trying to read something in my expression. Then he simply nodded. "If you're tired, you should rest more today." "I will." That was the end of the conversation. After breakfast, Lawrence left for work as usual, but before he walked out the door, he paused. "Don't skip your meals," he said. I nodded without looking at him. "Okay." The door closed a moment later, and somehow, the house felt much quieter than before. Later that afternoon, my phone vibrated, an unknown number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello?" A familiar chuckle came through the line. Well, that was fast. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Francis. Miss me already?" My stomach twisted in disgust. "What do you want?" "Just wanted to check on you," he said lazily. "How was your romantic dinner last night?" My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, come on," he said. "Don't pretend." A moment later, my phone buzzed again. A message. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It was a photo. The exact moment when Francis had trapped me against the wall at the restaurant. From that angle, it looked like we were about to kiss. My hands began to shake. "You see?" Francis's voice came through the phone again. Funny how a camera can change a story. "What do you want?" I asked again, my voice barely steady. "Nothing much," he said lightly. "Just remember that one little photo can ruin a lot of things." My heart pounded. "Delete it," Francis laughed. "We'll see." Then the line went dead. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Fear slowly crept up my spine. If Lawrence saw that photo, what would he think? The answer came almost immediately. He would believe it, because from his perspective, that was exactly what it looked like. That evening, when Lawrence returned home, something about him felt even colder than before. His expression was unreadable. He loosened his tie as he stepped into the living room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked quietly, "Did you go out today?" "No." Another pause. Then his gaze shifted to me again. "You ran into Francis the day of our scheduled dinner date." My heart skipped. "You knew?" "I saw." My chest tightened. Before I could explain, Lawrence spoke again. His voice calm, too calm. "You seemed close." The words felt like knives. My throat tightened. "That's not what you think." Lawrence held my gaze for a long moment, but the expression in his eyes had already changed. Cool, distant. "Whether it is or not," he said quietly, "it doesn't matter." His words stunned me. "This arrangement is only temporary." My breath caught. "Just remember one thing." His voice turned colder. "As long as you're carrying my child, don't embarrass me." And with that, Lawrence walked past me toward the stairs, leaving me standing there alone. The words he had spoken the night before echoed in my mind again. Temporary, contract, and now, don't embarrass me. My vision blurred as tears slowly filled my eyes. Because at that moment, I finally understood something. Lawrence had never trusted me, and maybe he never would. Chapter 7, A Truth No One Asked For. The house felt different now, not physically. Everything looked the same: the polished floors, the quiet hallways, the soft lighting in the living room, but something between Lawrence and me had changed, and neither of us talked about it. The next few days passed in a strange silence. Lawrence still made sure I had everything I needed. Meals arrived on time. My doctor's appointments were scheduled. The house staff treated me with the same respect as before, but Lawrence himself kept his distance. He came home late. Sometimes I heard his footsteps outside my room, pausing briefly before continuing down the hallway. But he never knocked. And I never opened the door. Maybe this was better. After all, it was only a contract. That was what he said. And contracts weren't meant to involve feelings. 3 days later, the calm shattered. Lawrence's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned slightly before answering.
Yes.
His voice was calm at first, then his expression darkened.
What are you talking about?
I watched him as he spoke on the phone, my heart slowly beginning to race. There was a long pause, then Lawrence stood up abruptly.
I'll handle it.
He ended the call and looked at me. Something in his eyes had changed again. Cold, controlled, but underneath it anger. What happened? I asked quietly. Lawrence didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed his phone on the table and turned the screen toward me. My heart dropped. It was the photo, the one Francis had taken. But this time, it wasn't just a private message. It was online, posted on a gossip page. The headline beneath it read, "Lawrence Carter's pregnant wife, caught in romantic moment with another man." My hands began to shake. The image looked even worse now. From that angle, it truly appeared like Francis and I were about to kiss. "I can explain," I said quickly. Lawrence studied me silently. For a moment, I thought he might actually listen. Then he spoke.
Explain what? That you met your ex at a restaurant? That he had you pinned against a wall? That someone just happened to capture the moment?
Each sentence felt sharper than the last. "That's not what happened," I said, my voice trembling. Lawrence's eyes hardened.
Then, what happened?
I opened my mouth. But suddenly the words felt stuck in my throat. Because the truth sounded ridiculous. Because the picture told a completely different story. My silence lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough. Lawrence looked away first.
Don't embarrass me. Forget it. I don't have time for this.
He picked up his coat. Before leaving, he paused beside the door.
Stay home today. That situation outside is already messy enough.
And then I heard it again, those same words he once said, cutting deeper this time.
Don't embarrass me.
The memory hit like a slap, sharp and unforgiving, dragging me back to that moment I wished I could forget but never could. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but somehow it sounded louder than a slam. Chapter 8, Too Late. Lawrence had just finished another meeting when Aaron entered the office.
The meeting had just ended, another contract secured, another room full of men trying and failing to outmaneuver me. Routine, predictable, controlled. Until Aaron walked in. He didn't knock the second time. That alone was enough to pull my attention away from the documents spread across my desk. "Sir," he said, voice measured, "we received another message." I didn't look up immediately. There was only one person it could be. Same number? Yes. Aaron stepped forward and placed the phone on my desk. The screen lit up. A video began to play. And there he was. Francis Bryce, sitting in a dimly lit bar like he didn't have a care left in the world. Like he hadn't already crossed a line he couldn't come back from. He smiled. Smug. Provoking. "Well, Mr. Carter," he said, lifting a glass slightly, "I see you're very busy cleaning up your fiancé's little scandal." I didn't react. Didn't give him the satisfaction. But my attention sharpened. Every word, every expression, every intention. Francis leaned closer to the camera, lowering his voice as if we were sharing something private. "But tell me something." His smirk deepened. "Are you sure my ex-wife is carrying your child?" The air in the room shifted. I felt it before I processed it. Behind me, Aaron went still. But I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak. Francis continued, slow, deliberate, calculated. "Because if I remember correctly," he said, tapping his glass lightly, "she was my wife for years." A pause then. "And yet we never had a child." Silence. The video cut to black. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then I leaned back slowly in my chair. Not reacting was a decision. Control was a decision. And I never lost control. "Aaron," Yes, sir. My voice sounded calm. Too calm. Investigate everything. A slight hesitation. Everything, sir? Now I looked at him. Everything. The fertility clinic. The doctor. The medical records. And Francis Bryce. Each word was precise, measured, unyielding. Aaron straightened immediately. Yes, sir. A quiet rhythm. Find out who's backing him. That made him pause. Backing him? I held his gaze. Francis is broke. His company collapsed weeks ago. That much I already knew. I made it my business to know. So tell me, my voice dropped, colder now. How does a bankrupt man suddenly afford photographers, leak scandals, and send me threats? Understanding flickered across Iran's face. Someone was funding him. Someone who either wanted leverage or wanted to see me fall. Yes, sir, Aaron said firmly. He turned slightly, ready to leave. And Aaron. He stopped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. If Francis is lying about anything. A brief pause, not for effect. For certainty. I want proof. Because if this was a bluff, I would crush it. And if it wasn't, then I would deal with that too, one way or another.
Meanwhile, inside the mansion, I sat alone in the living room. The house had never felt this large before, or this empty. For days, Lawrence had barely spoken to me. Even when we were in the same room, it felt as though an invisible wall stood between us. I placed a hand over my stomach. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't know if I was apologizing to the baby or to myself. The truth I overheard that night after the dinner, after the confrontation over the photo of Francis and me, still echoed in my mind. Once the baby is born, the contract ends. Maybe leaving now would make things easier. For both of us. Slowly, I stood and made my way upstairs. Packing didn't take long. I hadn't brought much with me in the first place. Just a small suitcase. And the quiet hope that one day this place might feel like home. I paused at the bedroom door. For a moment, I thought of Lawrence. The way he had defended me. The way he reminded me to eat. The way he quietly made sure I was safe. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. Or maybe I had simply hoped for too much. I closed the suitcase. Then, without looking back, I left the room.
Late that afternoon, my office doors opened without warning. Aaron. I didn't look up immediately, but I felt it. Something had shifted. The air itself was tighter. Urgent. Sir! That was when I raised my eyes. There it was. You found something. A beat. Yes. He stepped forward and placed several documents on my desk. I glanced down, scanning quickly. Names, timestamps, transactions, clean work, precise. Then, the photo at the restaurant was staged. My fingers stilled. Slowly, I leaned back. Explain. The photographer was hired. Trace the payment. A pause. Francis paid him. Silence settled over the room, thick enough to suffocate. I felt it in my chest. Not surprise. Confirmation. And the fertility clinic? I asked, my voice even. The records are real. Something flickered inside me, gone before it could take shape. The child is yours. My gaze dropped to the documents again, but I wasn't reading anymore, not relief. Something heavier pressed against my ribs. Something that demanded acknowledgement. I ignored it. Not now. Not when everything else was starting to align. There's more, Aaron said. I looked up. Francis shouldn't have money, but he received several large transfers last week. My expression hardened. From an anonymous account. Of course, my jaw tightened. So, someone is funding him. Yes, sir. We're still tracing the source. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping faintly behind me. This was moving too fast, too clean. Where is Selena? Aaron blinked, caught off guard. She should be at the mansion. Should be. That wasn't good enough. I grabbed my coat. Call the house. He was already dialing. I watched him, every second stretching longer than it should. Then, his expression changed. Subtle. but I saw it. Sir, my voice sharpened instantly. What? The staff says. He hesitated. Something cold slid down my spine. Miss Selena left the mansion very early this morning. For a moment, nothing, no sound, no movement, just a hollow silence opening inside my chest. Then it snapped shut. Find her! The words came out low, controlled, dangerous. Aaron moved immediately, issuing orders, making calls. But I wasn't listening anymore. Selena had been gone for several hours. My mind was already moving. Routes, exits, blind spots. Francis, the money, the setup. This wasn't coincidence, it was a move, and I was already behind. I could see it, too clearly. Selena stepping out of the gates, alone, a suitcase in her hand, leaving me. My jaw tightened. Then, a black van, too fast, too close. The door sliding open, men stepping out. Her reaction delayed, confused. The suitcase slipping from her hand. Let go! I could hear it. Then a hand over her mouth. Force. Efficient. Practiced. Seconds. That was all it would take. Door slamming shut. Gone. My hand curled into a fist. Too precise. Too clean. Francis wasn't capable of this alone. Someone else was behind it. Someone who knew exactly where to strike. Something darker rose inside me now. No longer contained. No longer controlled. Aaron. Yes, sir. Lock down everything. My voice was quiet, but there was nothing calm about it. They've made their move. I paused, then, so will I.
Across the city, I could almost picture the exact moment Francis saw the message light up his phone. The girl has been taken. He would have smirked, I know that look. The kind that thinks everything is going exactly as planned. But even Francis doesn't understand what he's really part of. Because the money funding this entire plan didn't come from him. It never did. He's just a piece on the board, useful, predictable, and far too confident in a game he didn't start. And somewhere else, far from the noise and chaos he helped create, someone is watching all of this unfold. Quiet, patient, untouched. I can almost hear their voice, low and certain. Now things are finally getting interesting.